vocals are on there as well. Don't let that stop you feeling if you want to ask a question that's of a general nature. If I can ask you if you've got one that's of a personal nature and is only relevant to your situation, if that can be held towards the end, and then we can stop the filming at that point before we put it online. Okay? Alright, so, first thing, I think all of this is quite familiar to you. Oh, sorry, I have to squeeze through.
Sorry.
I've got to actually press the button to change the slides.
Do you want me to move?
No, that's
Are
okay.
you sure?
Don't worry, because I'll stay behind you.
Okay.
So the key dates, obviously, the admissions round opened at the beginning of September, and some people will already have made their choices and submitted, but that doesn't matter. There's no race as long as it is submitted by the end of October 31st as the deadline. It's fine. There's no benefit in getting it in early. Of course, if you've got a child who's sat in 11 plus, you won't know the results yet, and you mustn't put in your application form until you know those results. There's no point. The whole point of them moving the 11 plus to this early in the term, the children have barely been back at school for 2-3 weeks when they do the test these days. The whole point of that is so that you know the school and you know if they've actually got enough, if they've met the threshold that day to get a place, and if they haven't, you don't then waste your options. You've got 5 options, which it sounds like a lot, but when you start to whittle it down, some people can find it difficult, and of course it's much easier if you know whether it's a realistic option to write down a grammar school. So the 11 plus results will be posted on the Monday, the 16th of October, next Monday. And obviously those parents who registered online for that, they'll be able to log in on the Tuesday morning from 9 o'clock. So those results will be on their way on paper anyway, but you can log in online, which is also more convenient for parents who may have got to work that morning and the post hasn't come yet. But obviously you need that email address that you've used to register and the password. Later this week, the children who've taken aptitude tests for the sports or performing arts at Eastwood will find out on the 13th. And as I said, 31st of October is the absolute deadline for school applications, and the offer date is the 1st of March. So no change to those key dates in the booklet. So as I said, you mustn't make a school application until you know the outcome of the test if they took the 11 plus, and there's no disadvantage in leaving it until that last day, as long as you do press submit. Because if they don't have the form, or if it gets delivered late on paper, your child goes to the back of the queue and is dealt with after every other place is allocated. So you really mustn't miss the deadline. If you're awaiting the 11 plus results letter, it gives you advice on whether or not there's a realistic chance of your child being able to actually get a place. So this year, if the score is over 303, your child is likely to be offered a grammar school place. And the only reason we say that is because there's a ring-fenced amount of places at that 303 in this local area. It's never been met in recent years. It's been 470, and that number has never been met. There's never been as many children reaching 303 from the South End priority areas as the number of ring-fenced places, that 470. And obviously, if this is the first year when more children get it, they might have to increase that 303 because there simply aren't enough places to be allocated. So it's not impossible that 303 will increase, but it hasn't happened yet, and those places have never yet been filled. What can also happen is particular schools can become very popular. So a couple of years ago, South End High for Boys was the popular school that lots of people applied for, and therefore, whilst your child might have got 303 and have achieved a grammar school place in principle, they couldn't necessarily go to the school of their choice because too many children got above 303 who also wanted a place at South End High for Boys, and they increased the score to 310. So there is always a little bit of caution when you get the letter, because we just want to say, don't think that that's a definite if your child's got over 303. They will have a place at a grammar school. but please don't let them think that's definitely it, that's the end of the game, they're going to be offered a place in March at the school they want, because we can't hand on heart say that, and they still have to await that confirmation. But it did revert back the following year. So, you know, the popularity changes, schools come in and out, sometimes they do workshops, they get more children going there for a rugby tournament or something, and that year, that's the popular school. So, you know, it can change with the wind. So the form that everybody has to fill in, irrespective of where you want your child to get a place, everybody has to fill in the common application form. That's the online form that you will have read about in your booklet, and I hope you're all familiar with the booklet. So this year it has the bright blue colour, 2018 to 19. This is like your real reference book for everything you need to know. There is a lot of detail in there that's very useful to refer to. And you're asked to give your 5 preferences, and it really is in order of preference. There's no tactics here really, because if you put a school that you really want, if you put them second, because if you don't get your child into that school, there's another school, and you feel if you don't put them first, you can't actually get them there, then you might get offered that, and there could have been a place at your second place school, if you see what I mean. There isn't any tactics here. It's about you putting them in order of preference, and the schools don't know where you put them. So if you put them at number 5, you are counted as having made a preference for that school. The school doesn't know that you've put them anywhere else. They can assume whatever they like, but it doesn't affect the way in which your application to that school is considered. Okay? You need to include in those 5 schools all schools, even if they're Essex schools, they have to be included on the form. All of these application forms are sorted, if you like. There's an arrangement, not just locally but nationally, with children moving, so there has to be a liaison through schools that are across boundaries. So your common application form, even for the Essex schools, is the one that you fill in. And of course your 5 preferences do include those selective schools if your child has met that threshold of 303 or above. So finding out about the schools, obviously the best place these days to have a look is at a school website. You can usually download a school prospectus. We'd always say take advantage of any open evenings and visits, go and try and see them during the day to get a picture of what they're like, and be open-minded. And I say that in a kind of loose way because, you know, we had this written a year or so ago by one of our ex-pupils who said, you know, some people just don't think about futures up the road as an option. And she wrote quite eloquently about how much she was enjoying her day-to-day experiences there. And I just dropped that in really because sometimes what we hear about the school is all the negatives, and there's a lot of hard work going on at all the secondary schools around us, all pushing forward to increase the children's achievements and opportunities. So it is about knowing what those options are and being open-minded about them and getting into the school, see what they really like. Because you find out from the online system on the Tuesday morning if you are successful in the test, it is recommended to do the online application. It's also a way of you knowing you've pressed submit and it's gone in, and it's a bit easier to predict than a piece of paper. So it is, if you need any support, then please do. We can do the application with you if you want to come into school. Do ask for any help. We can help you complete it, as I say, or we can just give you advice if you want advice about individual options. If your paper were to be delivered on the 1st of November, as I said, it would be considered late, and those places are given after everyone else has had their places allocated, and that really is to be avoided. And there's an address there, admissions@southend.gov.uk, and there's also an open event, which came out on the flyer recently, where you can ask questions at the local authority direct. They've got an open meeting. I'll see if I can find that date as we move through the meeting this morning. Before you submit it, do check each school's admission criteria, especially for an Essex school, because those schools, sometimes you might have an additional form to fill in for the school, a supplementary form. We'll come on to that in a moment. it's worth you checking what their expectations are, and it's worth you checking those criteria. Just in the same way that we've got this book for Southend schools. Of course, the Essex schools aren't in this one, but there is an Essex publication like this that you can access online that will give you that same criteria, how many children got in from the different distances and the different criteria for those secondary schools in the Essex version. And it will give you the knowledge of whether it's a realistic chance. There's no guarantees, because what happened last year might not happen again, but you get the picture for the last few years of how many children actually got in from your child's criteria, and also from the different distances. And it's just having that realistic knowledge that helps you choose what your 5 options are. So as we say, put them literally in the order that you want your child to go to them, because there isn't a guarantee of a place at any school, not even your catchment school. Now at the moment, Futures, they are hoping to change to South Church High imminently as they become an academy, but at the moment they are not full, and they haven't been full yet, but we are getting to a stage where people are actively choosing Futures, and at that point we will get to a position where if you don't put Futures, if it's your catchment school, you could end up, if none of your other options are taken up, you might get to a point where you're then sent to another school that you're not happy with that's also miles and miles away. Okay, so we would always say, try to put your catchment school that your child is likely to get into on one of your preferences, otherwise it can be equally disappointing and a long distance to travel to get to the school your child is allocated. We don't foresee that there are any issues. The numbers this year are similar to last year. There are enough places. Every child will be offered a place. And up until the moment of submitting, you can keep accessing your form and go back to it, change it, add to it, change your options. So you can start to work on it rather than leaving it to the last minute. And it's just at that point of submitting it that you no longer can change it. So the places, now I wouldn't like to be the person or the computer program that does this, but the council has to work to the admissions criteria of each individual school. And these, as we say, are listed in this blue booklet. So, and if you haven't got one of these, you can download a copy easily from online anyway and access all the information there. But it gives you that detail, as we say, about how places were offered, and it will give you that chance to see what the realistic chances are for this year. If you're applying for Eastwood or St Thomas More or St Bernard's, they also need a supplementary information form. They have an additional form, and if you're not aware of that and you write them as an option, you won't be able to get a place there because you won't fulfil the school's criteria. So as I say, it's worth being aware for those 3 schools particularly, but any of the Essex schools that are not included in the booklet, check to make sure they don't need one either. If your child is applying to Eastwood, don't tick the specialist box, the specialist place box, if your child hasn't taken the audition or hasn't been successful, because they can't get a specialist place on what you write on the form. They have to have been to an audition, which will already have taken place, and they have to have been successful. Yes, the SIF, the supplementary form, is in addition to the local authorities one, so don't do it instead, do it as well as. So the 1st of March is, and sorry, I should say 2018, is National Offer Day. They put it in the first class post for people who've applied on paper. Last year it said in the booklet that if you changed your email address between the point of submitting and you let them know you change it, they'd treat you as a paper person, so you wouldn't be able to access it online. Now they've taken that statement out this year, but I'd still suggest that you use an address that you know you're keeping. So if you've got a home one and a work one, and there's a possibility you might not be at the same place of work, use the home one, which you won't then have to change. If you're moving house, a change of address, they state, that if it's received after the 19th of January, may not be considered until after everybody else has been allocated a place. So in other words, you can still move house between the 31st of October and the 19th of January, as long as you let them know, and it can have an impact on where your child is allocated a place. But after that, they say their phrases may not be considered. So they're not saying it won't be, but they're just saying that it might not be possible to consider it until after. When they make those offers, they will either give you one of your 5 preferences or the nearest non-selective school to your house which has a place. And this is what I mean about the secondary schools that are local, that are working very hard, and they're getting to a point where parents are actively choosing them. It is important that you put a local stall on that you're happy that there is a realistic chance of your child getting into. Once you've got that offer letter, you get 2 weeks to accept the place. You get up until the 14th of March. And then the waiting list are maintained by the council for all of those schools up until the end of August. And actually, there's a lot of movement. We know of a number of different situations last year where children were moving schools right up to the last minute. In fact, a member of staff's own child got their place at Tommy Moore's literally the day before the summer term ended. And it is a bit painful in some respects because you're waiting, you know, the uniform for the other place has already been bought, you know what it's like. But at the same time, actually, there is quite a bit of movement because as places become freed up with somebody moving, there's another space to be allocated and people start moving up the waiting list. And there's no guarantees in that, and it is a bit painful and it can be a bit last minute. But actually the waiting lists are there, and you can, you're automatically able to be put on the waiting list for any of your 5 schools that you've been unable to gain a place at immediately. If you were to want to appeal because your child has been unsuccessful in getting into a particular school, you can of course do so, and you can appeal for all of your 5 schools, up to 5 if you want to. It's quite a painful experience, but you can go through that for each and every single one of them. You have the right to be on the waiting list and to appeal for all of those schools. And those admissions appeals will be heard in the May or the June, which again means it's quite last minute. We've known instances where parents have appealed without the child knowing, so they didn't want to unsettle their child and bring their hopes up. But it can be a bit of a waiting game. But we have to put a caveat on that. They're very, very rarely successful. Okay. And from September, once the children have actually started in their new schools, the waiting list then transfers to the individual school. And so you liaise with the school then rather than the local authority about finding out where you are on that list. So obviously, once those 2 weeks are gone, you get to the 14th of March, that's when the big shuffle starts. So the school admissions teams start to see where people have refused a place, they've got spaces, people get slotted into those spaces, freeing up other spaces. And they offer the spaces that arise to people who are already on that waiting list. So sometimes there will be children who haven't been offered a place, rarely, so they will be on a waiting list. It can be because the preferences have changed due to a change of address, or a late application means that a child wasn't offered a place. As it says, I've already said, you can be put on a waiting list for a school where you weren't allocated a place. And of course, you can still accept your offer, school place, and be on a waiting list, and up to 4 waiting lists. In fact, we would suggest that you always accept the place you're offered, even if it's not what you necessarily want for your child. You have a place then at a school, and if you don't accept that place, you could lose even that place. And if you, as I said earlier, if you're offered the nearest non-selective school to your house which has a place available, there's no guarantees anymore that that will even be local to you. So this is another statement from the book, in that places once offered can only be withdrawn in certain circumstances. So you can't lose the place you've been offered unless, if you fail to accept it, then of course it will be offered to someone else on that waiting list. If it turns out that there was misleading or fraudulent information provided on the application form, such as a claim has been made that a child lives at a certain address and actually they spend more than half a week at another address, that, if proven against you, that place can be taken away. This one, I don't know what sort of situation this would be in, but it says where the council offered the place in error. That seems to cover a multitude of sins in there, and I think they'd have to have a very good reason for why they feel they've offered the place in error, because you deserve to know if you were keen to accept it and they've withdrawn it. But they can't withdraw, and this is something that I've not seen in the booklet before, but it says they can be withdrawn up to the end of December of the round, which actually means the child could have been there for nearly 4 months. So, but that is something that has been stated. I've never been aware of anything like that happening, and I think sometimes some of these statements are put there to cover themselves in the case of, if somebody's address was found to be made fraudulently, then the school then has got a redress to go back and say, actually, your child shouldn't be here. Okay, so also in the admissions booklet, it goes through what the appeals process is like. There's paperwork clearly to fill in and to indicate what you think went wrong, if something went wrong in the application process, or in what way your situation has changed. Please do make an appointment to see us for advice. We can do a supporting statement for a child, which will give the school an idea of the clubs your child's involved in, their levels of attainment, and we can just give that kind of background piece of paper at the very least. We can attend an appeal with you at, if that is going to improve possibilities. As I said earlier, even if you're appealing, we would still advise you take the place, you accept the place you're offered somewhere else, because most appeals are unsuccessful. So the order of preference clearly goes 1 to 5, but schools don't know what you've written, they don't know where they are on the 1 to 5. And the way apparently the computer system works is it goes down your list. So it looks at your first school that you've chosen and it says at this point in time, is there a place for your child in that criteria? And it might say yes or it might say no. And it literally goes down the list for all 5. So you might have no, no, yes, yes, no. And it literally will offer you the place at the highest yes. And we're told it's as simple as that. So we must stress that you do not write down the name of the school more than once. It does not increase your chances, and yeah, certainly not all 5. Okay. So obviously, if you get yes, 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 you'll be offered number 1, your highest preference. If every one of your choices was realistic, then you'll be given that first one. So if there are places there, the place will be offered to you. And if there aren't, you will be offered the chance to stay on the waiting list, and you have the chance to appeal for the first preference, and as it moves on. So then they'll look at the second preference, and in the same way, and the place, if it's available, will be offered to you. And again, you get the chance to be on the waiting list, and you get the chance to appeal, and it continues all the way down to the 4th and 5th preferences. And if you get all the way to number 5 and it's still a no, then the school's admission team will allocate a place to you at that nearest non-selective school that has vacancies. What we will say is that all of the secondary schools around here and beyond are improving hugely and putting a huge amount of effort into those improvements. And we do know of children who've succeeded in every single one of the secondary schools. So a lot of it is down to a child's mindset. But it is often the case that a child will find that when they walk into a school, they feel more comfortable in one school than in another. And it is about getting in there with your child and seeing, what do you like? What does your child like? Where do they feel comfortable, feel like they fit? Having said that, what happens in March, that allocation of a place, is not going to affect your child's journey through life, because actually, as we've said, children can succeed at every single school. And the other thing we're very conscious of is that if you are given a school, a place for your child at a school, and you're feeling quite good about it, it doesn't have a good effect on you if other parents are saying negative things about that school. So we just ask if everyone is sensitive to the views of other parents and their children who are being allocated places in different schools, then the whole thing can be a lot less painful for people. We want to make sure that every child gets the opportunity to go to school they want to go to, but you know, for every child that's different. So I've gone through that quite quickly. I know there's a lot of material there and a lot of repetition. Is there anything anybody wants to add, ask on a general basis?
Yeah, I just would like to find out about the SEND provision that each school offers. Because rather than go, I know I can go and have a meeting with my SEND provider, but I'd like to just sort of have a little explore myself before I go into every school. I don't want to hassle them. It's not something I can look at. Have you got any advice? Are there any websites or anything I can check? Or
In terms of the special needs provision?
The provision, yeah. I spoke to Lighthouse and things. There's nothing they can sort of say.
I think the best advice, and I've had conversations with parents who've had children go into, certainly from Futures, where they've said it has just been amazing, because it's almost, I mean actually at the current time when their numbers are low, they've got sort of smaller class sizes often, and they're able to give children more one-to-one time. On a personal level, I would say, go and ask.
Yeah.
Say to the school, what can you do for my child? And be quite open about that. Make an appointment to see them.
Evenings and that, but there wasn't, so I've got the names from every school, but I thought I'm going to be a bit of a pain.
Yeah, you've got, but you can be literally up front and say, who can I, or just phone up and say, who can I speak to about special needs provision?
Yeah, okay.
And then directly ask them, what can you do? What is the provision that's available for my child? And they have to give you a response. And clearly, you want to know that response is immediate. They know exactly what's on offer once you're speaking to the right person, and they can allay your queries and any fears that you might have. And you know, I would certainly suggest that you do that, because you want to know.
It's just when to do it. That's why. Yeah, that's no problem. Okay, I'll do that.
And you can do that at any point. You want to know really before you put your preferences down, don't you? So now's the time to be making phone calls. You've only got up until that end of October. I know that the other thing is, by the time you've got your 11 plus results, if you're waiting for it, you've only got a couple of weeks, and one of those is half term.
Yeah, that's right.
So you have to really be, last week before half term is that kind of, you know, speak to as many schools as you can, make them work for it as well, and you know, get the information you want then before you put your preferences in.
Okay, great, thank you.
Okay. Anything else of a general nature? I'm quite happy to attempt to answer more personal queries if you want to stay behind. Alright, well the last thing, as it said, was good luck, and we do recognise that it's a very emotional time, it's difficult. Perhaps it's even worse for the parents than for the children, really, because you know, the children take it in their stride. Every single one of the children in their class are going through it. Don't let them be overly affected by what their best friend's writing, because you know, there's no guarantee their best friend will get to where they want to go either, and it can sway things if they try to get somewhere just because their friends are going there. But you know, we've got children who go literally on their own to the school. Children, there's only a couple of them. Children where there are large groups. I know some of the Essex schools now, the numbers travelling, they travel together sometimes. But every child is different, and you know, if there's anything we can do to help, then just please let us know. All right.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.